Number 1. When your boundaries are being crossed. When your boundaries are being crossed, it's easy to fall into the trap of thinking that staying silent is the best way to handle it. After all, maybe it's easier to just ignore the discomfort, keep the peace, or avoid confrontation, right? But here's the thing, silence in these moments isn't always a sign of wisdom or self-control. Sometimes, it's a quiet surrender to situations that should never have happened in the first place. In Stoic philosophy, there's this emphasis on understanding what's within your control and what isn't. And when someone or something is infringing on your boundaries, that's something you can control. Staying silent when your boundaries are being violated only opens the door for more violations. Imagine, for a second, that you're walking through your life, minding your own business, and someone starts pushing you in a direction you don't want to go. If you stay silent, you're basically giving them permission to keep pushing. The more you let these moments slide without speaking up, the more normalized it becomes for others to treat you in ways you don't deserve. It's as if you're saying, "It's fine, do whatever you want. My comfort doesn't matter." But if you dig into Stoic thinking, you'll realize that your comfort, your peace of mind, and your well-being are crucial. You have a responsibility to protect those things, not only for your own sake but to maintain your integrity and sense of self. And here's where it gets interesting. Boundary setting doesn't have to be about shouting, fighting, or creating drama. Stoicism teaches us that we can be firm yet calm. We don't have to meet aggression with aggression, but we can still stand our ground with clarity and purpose. There's strength in speaking your truth without feeling the need to justify or apologize for it. When someone crosses your boundaries, it's not an invitation for a battle, it's an opportunity to assert who you are and what you will and won't tolerate. Now, I get it. Sometimes, there's fear. Fear of rejection. Fear of pushing someone away. Fear of not being liked. But Stoicism urges us to look beyond the immediate discomfort. The pain of a brief confrontation is far less damaging than the long-term erosion of your sense of self if you keep letting things slide. You are not a doormat, and when you act like one by staying silent, you undermine your own worth. Your peace of mind is worth fighting for, and standing up for your boundaries is one of the clearest ways to protect that peace. The beauty of Stoic wisdom is that it's not about being perfect or always in control. It's about being honest with yourself, recognizing when your limits are being pushed, and taking action, even if that action is simply to speak up. The people around you will come to understand that you respect yourself, and in turn, they'll likely respect you more. And the best part? You'll respect yourself more, too. Because nothing feels better than standing up for who you are and not letting others dictate your boundaries for you. So, the next time you feel those boundaries being tested, don't stay silent. In fact, let your silence be the absence of tolerance for mistreatment, and let your words reflect your commitment to your own dignity and peace. You don't have to raise your voice to make an impact, just make sure your words, when they come, are rooted in confidence and respect. You deserve nothing less. Number 2, when witnessing injustice. You're standing there, heart pounding, watching something that doesn't sit right with your soul. It's that unsettling moment when you feel the weight of your conscience, telling you that what's happening is wrong. Maybe it's someone being mistreated or a situation where power is being used in all the wrong ways. Injustice has this sneaky way of making people freeze, convincing them that staying quiet is easier, or even safer. But here's the truth, silence in the face of injustice is like giving it a free pass. When you witness something unjust, your voice becomes a tool for balance, a weapon against wrong. Now, I get it, speaking up is easier said than done. There's a natural hesitation. Thoughts start swirling. What if I make things worse? What if I embarrass myself? What if no one else cares? That fear, though, it's part of what keeps injustice thriving. It feeds off silence, growing stronger in the shadows of our discomfort. Let's flip that perspective for a second. Think about how it feels to be on the receiving end of injustice. Imagine the desperation of wanting someone, anyone, to say something, to validate that what's happening isn't okay. That alone should nudge you to speak up, even if your voice shakes. Because here's the thing, sometimes, it's not about delivering a perfect speech or being the loudest person in the room. Sometimes, it's just about being the one who says, "This isn't right." But what if you feel too small to make a difference? It's tempting to think, what can I, just one person, really do? That's the trap, a dangerous lie that keeps people passive. The truth is, injustice hates resistance, no matter how small. Even a single voice can ripple outwards, breaking the illusion that no one cares. And here's the kicker, when one person speaks, it encourages others to find their courage too. Suddenly, what seemed like a lone battle turns into a collective stand. Now, let's talk about the gray areas, the situations where the lines between right and wrong blur just enough to make you second-guess yourself. This is where Stoicism steps in, reminding you to act in alignment with your values, not your comfort. Courage, after all, isn't about feeling fearless, it's about choosing to act despite the fear. And sometimes, it's not just about shouting from the rooftops. Maybe it's pulling someone aside, addressing the issue privately, or even using subtle gestures to disrupt the status quo. The method matters less than the act itself. At the end of the day, witnessing injustice is a test, a moment where your principles and your actions meet face to face. Will you stand idly by, letting wrongs slide? Or will you step into the discomfort, using your voice as a force for good? The choice is yours, but remember this, silence is not neutral. It's a vote for the oppressor, a quiet agreement to let things stay as they are. Speak up. Even if it's messy. Even if it's scary. Because the world doesn't just need more spectators, it needs more warriors for what's right. Number 3, when a loved one is in danger. Picture this, someone you deeply care about is in harm's way. Do you stand there, mute, and let fate decide their course, or do you step up and speak out? This is no time for silence, it's when your voice needs to cut through the noise and be heard. Your words, your actions, your presence, they could be the lifeline that saves them. Sometimes, danger isn't glaringly obvious. It could be subtle, creeping in like a shadow, a toxic relationship, poor choices, or even their own self-destructive habits. And while it might feel easier to stay quiet, to avoid conflict or upsetting them, that silence can cost so much more. Imagine the regret of knowing you could have done something but chose not to. Now, speaking up doesn't mean bursting into a room, wagging a finger, and shouting orders. It's about approaching the situation with courage and care. Your loved one might not even realize they're in trouble. Maybe they're caught in a whirlwind of emotions, blind to the danger, or too scared to admit it. Your voice, steady, compassionate, and firm, can be the anchor they need to pull themselves out. But let's be real, it's not always easy to speak up. You might second-guess yourself. What if I'm overreacting? What if they get mad? These thoughts are normal, but they're also distractions. When someone you care about is at risk, the stakes are too high for hesitation. Your concern might sting at first, but true love and loyalty often do. The goal isn't to criticize or control, it's to protect, to guide, to remind them that they're not alone in facing whatever storm they're in. Your words, however, have to be chosen wisely. A careless comment can push them further away, while a thoughtful one can bridge the gap. Instead of attacking the problem head-on, sometimes it's better to ask questions, listen, and let them open up. This creates a space where they feel safe to share, to reflect, to consider what you're saying. It's not about being loud, it's about being impactful. And here's the thing, even if your efforts don't seem to make a difference immediately, don't lose heart. Seeds of truth take time to grow. Your words might echo in their mind long after the conversation ends, guiding them towards safer ground. Silence, however, leaves nothing behind, no echoes, no hope, no second chances. So, when you sense danger circling someone you love, don't hold back. Speak, not because it's easy, but because it matters. Be the voice they need when there's falters. After all, love isn't just about being there for the good times. It's about standing firm in the tough ones, being willing to fight for their safety, even if it means stepping out of your comfort zone. Silence in such moments? That's a luxury no one can afford. Number 4, when someone is being bullied. When you see someone being bullied, the instinct to remain silent can sometimes creep in. Maybe you're unsure of how to react or afraid of making things worse. But silence in those moments? It's not just neutral, it's complicity. Stoicism teaches us to be responsible for our actions, yes, but it also emphasizes our duty to be aware of what's happening around us. And when someone is being mistreated, ignoring it doesn't just hurt them, it chips away at our own integrity. Here's the truth, standing by in silence while someone gets bullied isn't a stoic act of patience or acceptance. It's a choice to do nothing. Stoics believe in acting with virtue and purpose, and virtue isn't just about your own moral compass, it's about how you show up for others, especially in the face of injustice. Being silent in the face of bullying allows that injustice to persist unchecked, and that's something no Stoic would stand by. Now, you don't have to dive into the situation guns blazing, ready for a confrontation. Stoicism isn't about throwing yourself into battles that don't serve a greater purpose. But speaking up, even in small ways, can make a huge difference. Sometimes, all it takes is a word of support for the person being bullied, a simple acknowledgement that what's happening isn't okay. You might think that it won't change anything, that your one voice is too small to matter. But that's a limited view. One voice can spark something. One voice can show the person being bullied that they're not alone, that their pain doesn't go unnoticed, and that they deserve better. And that might just be the lifeline they need to stand tall again. And let's talk about that discomfort for a second. Stoicism isn't about ignoring feelings, it's about recognizing them and responding with rationality, not emotion. Yes, it might feel uncomfortable to speak up, especially when the bully holds power in a situation, but that discomfort is temporary. The guilt of not speaking up? That stays with you. If you choose silence, you'll carry the weight of an action long after the situation has passed. On the other hand, speaking out, even in a calm, measured way, aligns you with your own values and allows you to look yourself in the mirror without regret. You might also worry about the potential backlash. What if you get caught in the crossfire? What if the bully turns their attention to you next? These fears are valid, but they also show the importance of embracing the Stoic principle of controlling what you can control. You can't control the bully's reaction, but you can control your actions. You can control whether you choose to speak your truth, whether you stand up for what's right, even if the situation feels intimidating. The true strength of a Stoic isn't in avoiding challenges, but in facing them head-on, with grace and courage. In the end, silence when someone is being bullied isn't an act of peace or wisdom. It's an abdication of your moral responsibility. A Stoic doesn't just stand by when they see harm being done. They act, not from a place of aggression, but from a deep understanding of what it means to live with integrity and compassion. So, next time you see someone being hurt, remember that your voice matters. It doesn't have to be loud, but it does need to be there. Speak up. It's the Stoic thing to do. Number 5, when the truth needs to be spoken. There's a certain weight to the truth. It's not always light or easy to carry. In fact, sometimes, it feels like it might crush you. But that's the thing about truth, it demands to be spoken even when it shakes the ground beneath your feet. Staying silent when you know what needs to be said can eat away at you, like a slow burn in your chest. It nags at your conscience, reminding you that the moment to speak up is slipping further away. Speaking the truth isn't just about blurting out facts. It's about integrity, about aligning what's in your heart and mind with what comes out of your mouth. But let's be honest, it's not always the most comfortable thing to do. The truth can stir up conflict. It can make people squirm. It can even make you second-guess yourself. Yet, deep down, you know the truth has a power that silence never will. Think about those times when the air is thick with unspoken words. You can feel the tension. You know everyone is skirting around the obvious. And there you are, holding the truth like a match, wondering if it's worth lighting the fuse. It's tempting to keep quiet, to tell yourself it's not your place, or that someone else will eventually step in. But what if they don't? What if your voice is the only one brave enough to cut through the noise? Now, don't get it twisted, speaking the truth doesn't mean being harsh or reckless. It's not about throwing words like daggers or unloading your frustrations under the guise of honesty. Truth, when delivered with care and intention, has a way of piercing through the fog without causing unnecessary harm. It's about finding that balance, saying what needs to be said, but in a way that encourages understanding, not destruction. Of course, there's a catch. The truth isn't always welcomed with open arms. People might resist it, deny it, or even turn on you for speaking it. But here's the kicker, that doesn't make the truth any less valid. Stoicism teaches us to focus on what we can control, our words, our actions, our courage. You can't control how others will react to the truth, but you can control whether or not you speak it. And sometimes, it's not just about them, it's about you. The truth sets you free, sure, but it also keeps you grounded. It's a reminder that your values aren't just ideas, they're actions. When you stay silent, you betray yourself. You let fear, doubt, or convenience dictate your choices. But when you speak the truth, even when it's hard, you stand taller. You honor your principles. You become the person you're meant to be. So, when the truth needs to be spoken, don't hesitate. Let it out, even if your voice shakes. Because the alternative, living in the shadow of unspoken words, feels far heavier than the burden of honesty ever will. Number 6, when unethical behavior is happening. Alright, let's cut to the chase, seeing something wrong and staying quiet. That's a recipe for regret. When unethical behavior is happening, silence isn't just a passive act, it's an endorsement, whether you mean it or not. And that's the tricky thing about morality, you can't always sit on the sidelines. Sometimes, you've got to stand up, speak out, and call things what they are. Unethical behavior comes in so many shades. It's not always the big, flashy wrongdoing that screams for attention. It could be a subtle manipulation, a quiet act of dishonesty, or a rule bent just enough to blur the lines. And let's be honest, there's a moment, a split second, where you might think, should I say something? Maybe it's not my place. Maybe it's not a big deal. But here's the thing, if it makes your gut twist or your conscience flare up, it's worth addressing. Now, that doesn't mean you need to charge in, swords blazing, and declare yourself the moral police. Sometimes, the loudest message can come in a calm, steady tone. Speaking up against unethical behavior isn't about causing drama or making a scene, it's about drawing a line and saying, this isn't okay. And yes, it might feel uncomfortable. Heck, it might even backfire in the moment. But doing the right thing rarely comes gift-wrapped in ease and applause. Why do we hesitate, though? Fear of backlash, maybe. The worry that others will judge you, that you'll stir the pot too much, or that you're stepping into a fight you didn't ask for. That fear is normal, it's human. But ask yourself, what's the cost of staying silent? What kind of world do you contribute to when you let wrongness slide by unchecked? Because make no mistake, silence isn't neutral. It tips the scales, always. Here's where things get real. Speaking up doesn't guarantee you'll fix everything. You might raise your voice, and the situation still spirals out of control. You might call out bad behavior, and people might not listen. But that's not the point. The point is to act in alignment with your values. To stand firm in what you believe. To be the person who doesn't just talk about integrity but lives it, even when it's inconvenient, even when it's hard. When unethical behavior happens, your words can be the turning point. Maybe not for everyone involved, but for someone. Maybe even just for yourself. Speaking out isn't just about changing the world outside you, it's about shaping the one inside, too. Silence, on the other hand, eats away at that inner world. It creates cracks where doubt and guilt creep in. So, when you see wrong, don't shrink back. Say something. Challenge it. Speak up, not because it's easy, but because it's necessary. Because when you stand against what's wrong, you're also standing for what's right, and that's the kind of action that echoes far beyond the moment. Number 7, when defending your values or beliefs. When it comes to defending your values or beliefs, staying silent can sometimes feel like the safer option. After all, who wants to risk a heated debate or the potential discomfort of someone challenging what you stand for? But here's the catch: silence in those moments doesn't preserve peace. It dilutes your very essence. Stoicism teaches us that part of living virtuously is embracing and standing firm in our convictions. The idea is simple: your beliefs aren't just some abstract concepts, they're the core of who you are. If you stay quiet when they're being questioned or attacked, you're essentially giving up a piece of yourself. Think about it this way: your values shape the decisions you make, the way you live, and even the way you show up for others. If you allow others to dismiss or undermine them without saying a word, what message are you sending? It's like saying, "I'm not really sure what I stand for," or "it's not important enough to fight for." That's not the Stoic way. A Stoic doesn't shy away from defending what is right and true, especially when those things are personal and deeply ingrained. Now, defending your values doesn't mean that you have to go into full-blown battle mode at every opportunity. Stoicism teaches us to engage with wisdom, to not allow our emotions to dictate our actions. It's about staying calm and composed, but still being clear in your convictions. You can stand your ground without yelling, without losing your cool. It's not about proving you're right, but about ensuring that your beliefs are respected, not just by others, but by yourself. Because the truth is, if you don't speak up, you might start to doubt your own convictions, even if you don't realize it at first. Over time, this erosion can leave you feeling disconnected from your own sense of self. But let's be real for a second: defending your beliefs can be uncomfortable. No one likes to feel like they're being attacked for their views, or like they're constantly on the defensive. And yes, there's always the chance that the conversation might get tense or someone might take it personally. But silence? That doesn't protect you from conflict, it just leaves you with unresolved tension. In the long run, that silent acquiescence chips away at your confidence. It's like letting someone push you around without ever saying, "Hey, that's not okay." Stoicism reminds us that we can't control how others will react, but we can control how we respond. So when your values are questioned or misunderstood, the key is to respond with clarity and confidence, not defensiveness or aggression. You don't need to convince everyone, and you don't need to change anyone's mind. But standing firm in your beliefs, even in the face of opposition, is a mark of strength. It's a reminder that what you stand for matters, and that you, as a person, matter. It's also important to recognize that defending your values isn't about winning arguments. Sometimes, the act of defending your beliefs is just about stating them clearly, calmly, and firmly. In the world of Stoic philosophy, it's not about making others see things your way, it's about staying true to your principles regardless of the external noise. Whether others agree with you or not is secondary. What matters most is that you're staying true to what you believe. So, when the moment comes where you feel your values being challenged, Don't shrink back in silence. Speak up, not out of anger, but out of conviction. Your voice has the power to reaffirm not only your beliefs but also your sense of self. And that's a power worth using. Number 8. When someone asks for help. There's something humbling about the moment someone looks you in the eye, opens up, and asks for help. It's not an easy thing to do, for anyone. Asking for help means admitting vulnerability, recognizing that they can't do it alone. It's raw, real, and deeply human. And when someone reaches out like that, it's a crossroads moment for you. Your response matters. Your silence, or lack of it, matters even more. Think about it. When someone asks for help, they're trusting you. It's a small but significant leap of faith. They don't know for sure if you'll respond, if you'll listen, or if you even care. And yet, they've chosen to break the silence and reach out. That's brave. What isn't brave is turning away or pretending you didn't hear them. Ignoring a plea for help? That's like turning your back on what it means to be human. Now, let's be real, it's not always convenient to help. Sometimes, you're busy. Sometimes, you don't have the energy. Sometimes, you feel like you don't have the answers. And it's tempting in those moments to tell yourself it's not your problem or that someone else will step in. But here's the thing, help doesn't always mean solving someone's problem. Sometimes, it's just about showing up. Being there. Listening. Letting them know they're not alone. Your silence, on the other hand, can feel like a door slamming shut, leaving them standing there, alone with their struggles. Helping doesn't have to mean grand gestures or fixing everything on the spot. It could be a kind word, a bit of advice, or even just a moment of your time. You don't have to be perfect. You don't need all the answers. What matters is that you care enough to try. Even a small effort can make a huge difference. It can lift someone up, remind them that they're not invisible, that someone sees them and is willing to lend a hand. And let's not forget, Stoicism isn't about shutting yourself off from others. It's about living in harmony with nature, and humans are inherently social creatures. We're wired to help each other. By stepping up when someone asks for help, you're not just doing something for them, you're living in alignment with your values, with the principles of compassion and courage. You're showing that you're not afraid to engage with the world and its messiness. Sure, there might be times when you can't do as much as you'd like. That's okay. Even then, your willingness to acknowledge someone's need, to offer whatever you can, is what counts. Don't underestimate the impact of simply being there and breaking the silence with, "How can I help?" Those words can be a lifeline. So when someone asks for help, don't let your silence be the answer. Speak up, act, and connect. Because in those moments, your voice and actions carry the power to make a world of difference, for them and for you. Number 9. When silence enables harm. Sometimes, staying quiet feels like the easiest path. No conflict, no spotlight, no messy emotions. But what happens when your silence is the reason harm continues? That's the question you've got to wrestle with, because when silence enables harm, it's not just a passive choice, it becomes part of the problem. Think about it. Harm doesn't always show up like a raging storm. Sometimes, it's a slow erosion, something that creeps in gradually, almost unnoticed, until it's too late. And if you're standing there, watching it unfold, staying silent feels like betrayal, doesn't it? Not just to the person being hurt, but to yourself and everything you stand for. Harm thrives in the shadows, and silence is the cloak that lets it hide. But let's be real, it's not always easy to speak up. Fear kicks in. Maybe you worry about making waves, being misunderstood, or stepping on toes. It's tempting to convince yourself that someone else will say something, that it's not your battle, that you're better off staying out of it. That internal debate is like a tug-of-war between your conscience and your comfort zone. Here's the thing, though, silence has power. It's not neutral, it carries weight. When you choose not to speak up, you're unintentionally giving permission for harm to continue. It's like standing by while a fire spreads because you don't want to yell fire and disturb the peace. Except, in this case, the fire might be burning someone's dignity, safety, or even their future. Speaking out doesn't mean you need to be loud or dramatic. Sometimes, it's a quiet, firm statement, a gentle but clear stand against what's happening. Other times, it's about asking questions that make people think or stepping in to offer help when no one else will. The way you act matters less than the fact that you act at all. Harm can take many forms, and so can resistance. Now, let's address the fear. Yeah, speaking up might make you unpopular. It might get messy. You might stumble over your words or face pushback. But think about the alternative. Picture yourself looking back on this moment, knowing you had the chance to make a difference but chose to stay quiet. That kind of regret has a way of lingering, doesn't it? When harm is happening, your silence doesn't protect you, it traps you. It ties you to the very thing you're trying to avoid. But when you speak up, even in the smallest way, you're breaking that chain. You're creating a ripple that could change the course of what's happening. Maybe it's not a tidal wave, but ripples matter too. So, when you see harm unfolding, don't hesitate too long. Find your courage, even if it shakes. Speak, even if your voice wavers. The harm you stop might be bigger than you realize, and the stand you take will echo far beyond the moment. Silence might seem safe, but action is what truly protects and heals. Number 10. When facing workplace harassment. Facing workplace harassment is one of those situations where silence can feel like the easiest option. You might fear backlash, doubt whether it's worth speaking up, or think that staying quiet will help you avoid more trouble. But here's the truth, silence in these moments is not your friend, it's a silent agreement to let the situation continue. Stoicism teaches us that we have control over how we respond to life's challenges, even when we're placed in uncomfortable or unfair situations. And when it comes to harassment, not speaking up isn't just a passive response, it's a choice to tolerate behavior that goes against your dignity and values. Think about it, when you allow harassment to continue unchecked, you're not just letting someone cross boundaries, you're allowing them to make you feel smaller, less than you are. A Stoic doesn't shrink in the face of adversity, they confront it with strength, resolve, and integrity. Facing workplace harassment can be daunting, no doubt, but it's also an opportunity to practice the Stoic virtues of courage and justice. You don't have to become a crusader, but standing up for yourself is about more than just defending your space, it's about protecting your self-respect and sense of worth. Now, I know it can feel overwhelming. You might worry about the consequences of speaking up. Could it cost you your job? Will people view you differently? These concerns are real, and Stoicism doesn't ask you to ignore them. But it does encourage you to weigh the longer-term cost of remaining silent. What happens to your self-esteem, your mental health, your sense of peace if you choose to suffer in silence? The answer is simple, it erodes. Over time, that silence turns into resentment, frustration, and even self-doubt. And that's not the path a Stoic would choose. Stoicism isn't about avoiding hardship, it's about handling it with grace, standing tall, and refusing to be diminished by it. Defending yourself against harassment doesn't mean you have to escalate the situation or get confrontational. Stoicism encourages us to remain calm, clear-headed, and in control of our emotions. You don't have to shout or make a scene, but you do need to assert your boundaries in a direct and firm way. When someone crosses a line, say it. Tell them it's not okay. You don't need to apologize for expecting respect, you deserve it, period. And if the harassment continues after you've spoken up, that's when Stoicism really comes into play. You might feel tempted to go into fight or flight mode. But remember the Stoic ideal of focusing on what's within your control. You can't control the behavior of others, but you can control how you respond. You have the right to protect yourself by seeking help, reporting the behavior, or taking steps to remove yourself from the situation. The key is not to let yourself become complicit by staying silent. Inaction is a form of acceptance, and that's not something a Stoic would ever accept. In the end, workplace harassment is about power, someone trying to make you feel less, trying to manipulate or dominate you. But Stoicism teaches that true strength doesn't come from yielding, it comes from standing firm in your principles. Your peace of mind, your dignity, and your well-being matter, and when faced with harassment, speaking up is the most Stoic thing you can do. It's about taking back your power, setting boundaries, and demanding respect, not just from others, but from yourself, too. Number 11, when an apology is needed. There's a kind of weight you carry when you know you've done something wrong, even if it's a small thing. It sits there, unspoken, gnawing at the edges of your peace of mind. You can try to ignore it, push it to the back of your head, but deep down, you know what needs to be done. It's simple in theory, just apologize. But let's face it, saying I'm sorry can feel like pulling teeth. It's uncomfortable, humbling, and sometimes downright awkward. Yet, it's one of the most important things you can do. Apologies aren't just about smoothing things over or ticking some moral checkbox. They're about owning your actions, stepping up, and taking responsibility. And when the moment calls for it, silence isn't just unhelpful, it can be harmful. Avoiding an apology doesn't make the situation go away, it festers. It leaves a gap where accountability should be, and that gap only grows with time. But why is it so hard? Ego plays a big part. Nobody likes admitting they were wrong. It can feel like you're exposing a part of yourself you'd rather keep hidden, like you're giving up some imaginary power. The irony is that the opposite is true. A heartfelt apology doesn't make you weaker, it shows strength. It says, I'm not afraid to face this. I value our connection more than my pride. And honestly, there's a kind of freedom in that. An apology doesn't have to be a big, dramatic thing. It doesn't need a rehearsed speech or fancy words. In fact, the simpler and more sincere it is, the better. I messed up, and I'm sorry carries a lot more weight than a long-winded excuse. People don't need perfection, they need honesty. They need to see that you recognize the hurt or inconvenience you caused and that you care enough to acknowledge it. Now, here's the tricky part, apologizing isn't about expecting forgiveness. That's not your call to make. A real apology doesn't come with conditions or guarantees. It's about doing what's right, regardless of how the other person reacts. Sometimes, the apology won't fix everything. But that doesn't mean it wasn't worth giving. It's a step, a gesture, a way of saying, I respect you enough to make this right, as best as I can. Stoicism reminds us to focus on what we can control, our actions, our words, our choices. An apology is entirely within your control. Whether or not someone accepts it, that's on them. But you'll know you've done your part, that you didn't let silence be the final word when accountability was needed. So, when the moment comes, and you feel that knot in your stomach, don't shy away from it. Speak up. Let the words come out, even if they stumble or feel clumsy. Because an apology, no matter how imperfect, is always better than silence. It's a bridge, sometimes shaky, but a bridge nonetheless, that connects you to the person on the other side. And that connection is worth the effort. Number 12, when advocating for the vulnerable. There are moments when life demands that you speak, not for yourself, but for those who can't, or won't, speak for themselves. These moments are a test of your character, your courage, and your commitment to doing what's right. Advocating for the vulnerable isn't just an option, it's a moral obligation. When someone's voice is too quiet to be heard, or when their circumstances leave them powerless, silence isn't neutrality, it's complicity. The vulnerable exist in many forms. It's not always about physical weakness or visible struggle. Sometimes, it's someone trapped in a system that doesn't see them, caught in a cycle they can't break, or silenced by fear or shame. It's easy for society to overlook these people, to let their struggles fade into the background noise. But when you notice, when you see the injustice or neglect, that's the moment to step up. Let's be real, speaking up for someone else can feel daunting. You might worry about overstepping, about getting involved in something too big or messy. You might even second-guess whether your voice will make a difference. But here's the truth, silence only strengthens the systems and circumstances that keep the vulnerable stuck. It's a shield for the status quo, and sometimes, the status quo is the problem. Advocating doesn't mean shouting from the rooftops or staging grand gestures, though sometimes that's necessary. It can start small, a word, a question, a refusal to turn away. You don't need to have all the answers or be some kind of savior. What matters is your willingness to acknowledge what others might ignore and to act when it's easier not to. But let's not sugarcoat it, advocacy can be uncomfortable. You might find yourself standing against popular opinions or rubbing people the wrong way. It's not always convenient to challenge the norm or question authority. Yet, the alternative is worse. Imagine the weight of knowing you could have spoken up but didn't. That kind of regret is heavy, and it sticks with you. Here's where it gets interesting. Advocating for the vulnerable isn't just about them. It's also about you. It's about the kind of person you want to be, the principles you want to live by. Every time you speak up, you're strengthening your own integrity. You're reminding yourself that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's action despite it. And don't underestimate the ripple effect of your actions. Your voice, your stand, can inspire others to do the same. You might not see the impact right away, but seeds take time to grow. What matters is that you plant them. So, when you see someone who needs a voice, be that voice. Speak up when it's uncomfortable, when it's scary, when it feels like no one else will. Because sometimes, your words are the only bridge between their silence and the justice they deserve. In a world full of noise, let your voice be the one that truly matters. Number 13. When staying silent compromises your integrity. When staying silent starts to compromise your integrity, that's when you know it's time to speak up. It can be tempting to keep quiet, especially in situations where you feel like saying something might cause drama or upset the balance. But here's the thing, silence might seem like the easy way out, but it can quietly chip away at your sense of self, and that's when things start to get tricky. Stoicism teaches us that integrity, living in alignment with your values, is key to living a virtuous life. And when you stay silent in situations that require you to act or speak up, you're not just avoiding conflict, you're betraying your own values. Think about the times when you've held back something important because you didn't want to rock the boat. Maybe you felt like the price of speaking out would be too high. Maybe you told yourself, it's not worth it, or it's not my problem. But what happens to your internal peace when you choose silence over action? Slowly, over time, that silence builds up into a quiet resentment, a feeling of disconnection between who you truly are and how you're showing up in the world. Stoicism teaches that the most important thing is living in harmony with your core principles. If you silence your truth for fear of upsetting others, you're straying from that path. Silence in these moments isn't neutral. It's not like you're just sitting back and watching. No, staying quiet when you should speak is an active choice to suppress your own beliefs, your own voice. And eventually, that choice catches up with you. You start to feel less like yourself. You start to wonder why you didn't say what you truly felt. That gap between who you are and who you're pretending to be gets wider, and the longer you let it stretch, the more difficult it becomes to reconnect with your true self. It's not that speaking up is always easy. It's not. Stoicism doesn't promise that life will be free from discomfort. In fact, it asks you to embrace challenges, even when they make you uncomfortable. But what Stoicism does promise is that when you live in alignment with your values, you build strength. You build resilience. You build a sense of integrity that no external circumstance can touch. When you compromise on your integrity by staying silent, you may avoid short-term discomfort, but you create a long-term erosion of self-trust. There's also this idea that, by staying silent, you're somehow being good, that you're avoiding conflict and keeping things peaceful. But peace that comes at the expense of your truth isn't real peace, it's avoidance. Stoicism teaches that true peace comes from within, from knowing that you're acting in accordance with your highest values, no matter what the outside world does. The true peace you're looking for isn't in the absence of conflict, it's in standing firm in your integrity, even if it means facing discomfort. And let's not forget that silence in the face of injustice, or when you feel like something's off, isn't just bad for your integrity, it's bad for everyone involved. Sometimes, speaking up doesn't just protect your own values, it sets a standard for others. It tells people that there's a line you won't let anyone cross. When you stay silent, you're not just hurting yourself, you're reinforcing the very behavior you disagree with. By remaining silent, you're giving your tacit approval to things that undermine your values, and that's a compromise you shouldn't be willing to make. So, the next time you feel that tug inside to stay quiet because speaking up might make things awkward or difficult, pause and ask yourself, am I willing to compromise my integrity just to avoid the discomfort of being honest? Because true strength comes from being willing to speak up, even when it's hard, even when it's uncomfortable. When you choose silence that compromises your integrity, you're letting go of the very thing that gives your life meaning. Speak up, not just for the world around you, but for your own sense of self. It's the Stoic thing to do. Thank you for watching. Knowing when to speak up is just as important as knowing when to stay silent. Stoic philosophy teaches us to act with wisdom and courage, especially in moments where our voice can uphold truth, justice, or integrity. If this video gave you clarity, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss out on more empowering content. Share this video with someone who could benefit from learning these important principles. Remember, silence is golden, but speaking up when it matters most is priceless. Stay wise, stay brave, and keep building your inner control. See you in the next video.